Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 Hooper, current high school coach, teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids, and Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press. Omari, my guy, fireworks of all things. We're kind of getting crushed on Pistons Twitter Sunday night. So I got to ask, are you a fan or not of fireworks?
I'm indifferent, I would say. Like, I'm not the one that's going to go out of my way to go see fireworks, but if I'm with people who want to go see them or family wants to go see them, I'm down for it. I would say I do get annoyed at the people who like to pop fireworks on random days of the week leading up to July 4th. I don't necessarily want to hear them on 3 p.m., like the Saturday before. There was like one random one that popped off last night at like 11:30. That was just like this massive firework in like the middle of the street in Midtown, and like I didn't see what the point was because it only popped one. And it was like, was that just a test run for tomorrow? I don't know. But you have kids. I feel like that's more of like a if you're popping off the small ones, it's more so to entertain the kids, and if you're popping off the big ones, you're probably like 19 years old because big fireworks are cool. Me personally, I think I could probably just leave them, honestly.
I mean, this whole thing has changed since I was a kid. They didn't have the huge big ones for like just residential use. I don't know. Has that been a thing your whole life? Like when I was a kid, if you wanted to see the big ones that like were up, high into the sky, you went to the local town community fireworks show. Now every person on the block is putting on their own show, which I'm kind of indifferent as well about fireworks. Luckily, a couple of ours are scared of them, so we don't have to spend a whole bunch of money on them because those things are expensive. But I feel like this whole thing has changed the last, 5 or 10 years.
I hate to potentially spew misinformation on a newspaper pod, but I believe like the big ones were illegal in Michigan for a while, and then they kind of loosened that restriction. Like I know when I was younger, people used to drive to Ohio and get like the big fireworks. So,
okay.
Just like we would just like stand in the backyard or look out the window, and it would be like an unofficial fireworks show almost, just from other people who are popping off the big ones that we're supposed to have. But I mean, like there's so many different shows in Metro Detroit. Like you could probably go see 7 or 8 over the course of the weekend. And then in the individual neighborhoods, everybody's popping off the big ones. So definitely a rough night for the dogs.
Yes,
yes. I know most dogs are not fans. And if your kids aren't fans, so maybe it's better that they're kind of isolated from all of it because we're recording this Monday morning on July 4th, so I know it's going to be crazy tonight.
Yeah, I will say one of the coolest ones I saw was whenever the summer before I started at American University, my mom and my oldest sister came out to help me get settled in the summer, right around the July 4th, and we watched the fireworks show from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And so you could like see them in the sky, but then they were reflecting off the pool there as well. Like it was pretty cool to do that with my mom and my older sister. But hopefully everybody had a safe and fun 4th of July. But let's get into some Pistons talk, Omari. We do have some new players on this roster since our last episode. The previous 2, we talked a lot about Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey, even Gabriel Procida. The Pistons also acquired via trade Nerlens, Noel, and Alec Burks. And we'll get into that trade just a little bit, and if it's 1 or 2 and everything with the Knicks. A lot of former Knicks players on the roster now, Omari, this free agency and offseason. So what are the Pistons getting in a guy like Alec Burks, and what did you think of that trade overall?
I think the main thing with Alec Burks is that he can shoot the ball, career 38% shooter. He's knocked down about 40% last few seasons. And he's really good off the catch, so he's filling a lot of needs for a team. And he's a bigger wing. He's like 6'6", so he's got pretty good size for a guy who can play the 2 or the 3. So he fits a lot of needs, and I think he just checks a lot of the boxes the Pistons need checked this offseason as far as just having that sweet shooting wing. Of course, he lit up the Pistons, I think, twice last season. So Pistons fans don't need, like him and Mitchell Robinson were just like, like tag teaming the Pistons pretty well last season, especially before they were able to handle Mitch Rob defensively. So I know Pistons fans are familiar with Alec Burks because of that. But he just feels a need, I would say, of all the players they have acquired thus far, and there's only a handful. He's probably the guy that, other than Bagley, we could probably see on the floor most, just because he does do a lot of stuff that the roster currently does not have.
Yeah, and you mentioned the shooting stats earlier. Low to mid 40% catch and shoot the last 2 years combined. So like 42, 43%. So definitely a catch and shoot guy, but he can also get shots out of the pick and roll, like pull up jumpers. He's not necessarily a guy that's getting to the rim maybe, but you can still operate him in some ball screen situations where he's going to get his shot that way. So that overall haul between the Pistons and the Knicks. Obviously, we've talked about Jalen Duren, Kemba Walker, who got waived or will get waived at the start of the new year. I don't know if that's officially happened or not. All this time of the year gets a little bit confusing what's official, what's not. Burks, 2 second-round picks, and then Nerlens Noel. The Pistons essentially sent out that 2025 Bucks first from the Jeremy Grant trade. Nerlens Noel, another guy who maybe could fit a role and a need for this team. What do you think about Nerlens Noel and where he kind of fits on the roster?
I think he kind of gives you what you hope to get from Duren in a few years to an extent, just as far as being a rim protector and a lob finisher. But a guy really who could play defense, I think, which outside of Isaiah Stewart, this roster didn't have a lot of rim protection last season. So now, along with Beef Stew, Duren, and Noel, you have 3 guys who could do that. His fit on this roster is interesting just because offensively, I think Bagley does what he does, except a little bit better. And you might be able to get the same thing from Duren as well. And then defensively, really only he, Stewart, and Duren are giving you any sort of rim protection. And Duren is in quotes because he's a rookie and 18 years old, so we don't know. There's just a lot of overlap. And, I know people have been trying to figure out Detroit's rotation next season. And it wouldn't surprise me if we don't see a lot of Nerlens, honestly, just because if you just kind of look at the order of, I don't want to say order of operations, but just sort of like what the organization's long-term goals are, there's not a lot of room for Nerlens. Both he and Burks have team options for next summer, so there's a good chance that they're basically on expiring contracts. And you're just looking at that rotation, and you have Olynyk who can shoot. You have Duren, who could probably use some minutes. And often we'll see him. But then Isaiah Stewart and Bagley, who you just, signed to a 3-year deal, fully guaranteed. I just don't know if Nerlens does one thing that makes him an obvious candidate to receive playing time every single night. And then you also couple that with the fact that he also has an injury history.
Yeah, 25 games last year is all he played, Omari.
I'm just curious about that, but I think this rotation makes a little bit more sense if you consider that Nerlens may not play. And I'm just curious to see in the minutes he does get kind of what he can do to help him stand out a bit, because he's not that great of an offensive player. Like outside of catching lobs, he's not giving you a whole lot else. So potentially you're probably getting more upside by playing other guys there.
That's the give and take, though, because when this trade happened, everybody said, hey, this isn't bad for the Pistons. They got 2 second-round picks back. Both of these guys are on good contracts, Omari, right around $10 million, team options for not this season, but the next season. But you got to play Nerlens Noel if you're going to flip him at the deadline or next offseason. So what's the give and take there? Like, I almost think you play him a lot the first 40 games of the season, try to raise his trade value, flip him as an asset at the deadline, and then you can give minutes to the guys we're talking about. But that's an interesting little dynamic to try to play with there.
It is. I think the thing with Nerlens is that even if you do play him and he does have a good season, are you getting more than a second-round pick for him? So I think you kind of just look at the upside where it's like, well, the best-case scenario, if he is the main highlight in the package, like what's the best-case scenario for that? And will the team give up any sort of asset for a guy who could hit the market that summer anyway? You could just sign him for less money because you basically look at that contract as a 2 or 3 month rental, and a guy who maybe gives you another body in the playoffs. So maybe if you have a contender who is just absolutely desperate for any type of center who can play, you could capitalize on that. But in the grand scheme for Detroit, if you include Nerlens in a deal, to me, it would more likely be for salary matching purposes because you're taking on a contract and a salary dump, or maybe you're trading for a player. Like you're just doing your shopping early, basically. You're looking at the 2023 class. You have a lot of cap space. And you're saying, instead of just trying to poach away restricted free agents or use our money on role players, you're going to go in and do like a kind of like the Tobias trade a few years ago or the Blake trade. You're just making a trade early, eating into that cap space, but getting a guy you want. And Nerlens and Burks both being on expiring deals, basically, both fit that pretty well. So from Detroit's standpoint, just as far as Nerlens' contract, I would think that they would just include it in a larger deal and probably wouldn't look at Nerlens as an individual asset who could get something back. So from that regard, I think you play Nerlens if he is just better than everyone else. Like he's a rim protector, lob threat. You need that vertical space to get the starting lineup. And of course, Bagley has some question marks on defense. So maybe Nerlens is a bit safer to play in that regard or just easier to fit. But otherwise, it just seems like, if you're Dwayne, you're Troy, you're looking at the roster, you have to play Isaiah Stewart, you have to play Bagley. You have like Kelly's only guy that can shoot in that rotation. And then maybe you still want to find some minutes for, like Duran here and there or whoever else. Like it just seems like it would be tough for Nerlens to find like that consistent role from night to night unless guys are in foul trouble and now Nerlens comes in. But that's just my read on it now. Like things could change, rotation could change, but it just seems like Nerlens is in sort of a weird spot right now.
Maybe that's the way they play this out, right? Those team options are very important for next offseason. I was just looking at the salary cap there. If you just decline those, like just keep both of those players and decline them, Amari, that opens up $20 million. KO's only on the books for $3 million guaranteed. Some more dead money comes off. Kimba's will come off as dead money. Like the Pistons could have 50, 60 million next offseason too, just kind of doing some rough numbers. So maybe you don't trade him for just a second round pick, like you're saying. Maybe you don't need to play Nerlens Noel and try to raise his trade value. Maybe he's just sitting there in case of injury or if Jalen Duren's really not ready. And all of a sudden, if Jalen Duren's in the G League and Nerlens Noel is just like a safety guy, if something happens, that rotation kind of, evens itself out a little bit because they brought back a guy like Marvin Bagley on the 3-year, $37 million deal. I've talked about the money. Me and Wes have texted about it for days now. What was your initial thought to 3 years, $37 million, fully guaranteed, no options for Marvin Bagley III?
I would say it was definitely on the high end of what I thought was possible for him. I sort of guessed it would be somewhere between the 7 and 13 million range, which is it's a pretty big range, obviously. And if I had to guess before they put ink to paper, I probably would have guessed it would have been in like the 9 to 10 range. So either way, for him to be around 12 and a half a year, definitely on the higher end. I don't think it's a significant overpay. I think, for what you get from Bagley, he's a very efficient scorer, good around the rim, short mid range, good lob threat, rebounds pretty well. Still pretty young. I mean, I think he's 23 years old, so maybe a guy who still has some improvement in him. And I would think, the Pistons giving him a contract that healthy, they would think that he probably has some more upside that he hasn't tapped into. We'll have to see as far as that. He has to get better defensively. He doesn't really space the floor at all. So in some ways, I think Bagley is more of your kind of old school tweener, like the guys that like the Thomas Robinsons and whatnot, exactly where do they fit defensively, but are they giving you on offense? And I think that's why some people really aren't fans of the deal. But the other aspect of that is that Detroit's cap situation is so clean that
yes.
It probably doesn't make sense to sweat $2 or $3 million anyway. The cap's going to continue to go up. So, like worst case scenario, maybe he becomes just an expiring in 2 years and maybe you can just flip him or you just write the deal out. And in best case, he really is a guy who is something of a go-to scorer, with the second unit or just a reliable scorer with the first unit. And it's pretty good money and he just lives up to the deal. So yeah, like on the higher end of what I would have expected, but I don't think it's such an overpay that it creates any issues for the Pistons in the future, which is the bottom line for any deal.
Well, and it's a trade match as well, right? Like as we see this offseason unfold and all these different players getting traded and, Kevin Durant's out on the market. I assume still on the market Tuesday morning. Knowing Kevin Durant, he's probably the trade's probably going through, on the evening of the July 4th while everybody's watching the fireworks show. But you need some contracts like that. Like you can't just have $25 million deals and then $5 million deals and nothing in the middle. All of a sudden it becomes hard to match money. And so now you have a lot of guys. The Pistons have a lot of guys in that range, Omari, between KO, between Burks and Noel, and now Marvin Bagley III, where if they were able and in play for a $40 million guy next offseason or at this trade deadline, they have the numbers to make it work. Now, you'd have to attach some other stuff. Those guys probably don't get it done on their own, but it could be a trade match. I do want to say some national guys were scratching their heads a little bit. I listened to the Sam Vecini podcast. He thought it was a little high. Keith Smith, friend of the podcast, thought it was a little high. But I love what you said. The books are so clean, testament to Troy Weaver in the front office, that I don't think it necessarily matters. And so hopefully what you see is Bagley develop a three-point shot, or the defense comes around in some way, and this turns into a really, really good contract. If nothing else, we saw how effective he was playing with Killian and Cade as a lob threat.
And I think that's the bottom line. I think we could probably stay with some certainty now after watching Troy for about 3 years, is that he isn't always as, stressed about just the small details of deals here and there. For guys making $2 million more than you would have paid, I think Troy kind of shrugs. Troy always talks about building with people, and it sounds like GM speak sometimes, but then you see the moves he makes, and I think it's pretty clear that he does take those things into account, chemistry and just how players fit in the locker room and whatnot. And Marvin Bagley finding chemistry with Cade Cunningham and Killian Hayes immediately, I think that factored into the contract he got, because for a fact that he meshes extremely well, with your two most recent lottery picks, other than, of course, this past draft. But I think that matters. And I think that he's made moves with the knowledge that from an overall chemistry standpoint, a player may be worth more in Detroit than he is worth elsewhere. During his production next year is theoretical. You don't know if he's going to be the lob threat that they need. Nerlens, you don't know if he's going to stay healthy. So Troy may have just looked at last season and thought, hey, we didn't have a lob threat for 50 games and it was really bad, and we're not going to make that mistake again. So we're going to double dip, and it's only one season. We're not going all in for the Eastern Conference Finals next year. So let's just get Bagley in. We like him. We want him to feel good. We want him to know he's appreciated. And there's still a good chance he can live up to this deal as well. I think that's how Troy sees it. He's not, thinking as far as just pure, cap numbers and whatnot. He's not stressed about that. The cap's clean, so Bagley fits, and we're going to invest in him.
We saw how important it was to add that lob threat last offseason. So can you blame Troy Weaver for saying there's no way we're going to play a game in the 22-23 season without a lob threat? I don't mind him double dipping, triple dipping on that and making sure, because you got Bagley, you got Noel, and then even Jalen Duren. And I think you spoke to something there, Omari. I was thinking about this morning. Jeremy Grant, I think, ended up where Jeremy Grant wanted to go, or at least is going to be happy, right? It's all been reported. Him and Damian Lillard are friends. So I know Weaver said that was the best deal. I don't know if I believe that or not, but if that's where Jeremy wanted to go, I'm okay with it. I believe they did the same thing with Derrick Rose, getting him with Tibbs in New York. Think about what they've done with Jay Ivey with the jerseys from his parents and his grandparents and the welcome. And we're going to talk about Jordan Brink in segment 3 with the summer league coach for the Detroit Pistons. I don't know. I wasn't here before Troy Weaver, but I feel like Troy Weaver has gone out of his way to do those relationship things, those connections, and that is going to come back to the Pistons organization at some point. That's good business, and I do think those things are important, even if you don't see it right now. I think Troy Weaver is very smart about doing things that way.
Yeah, I think so too. And, we'll see how some of this stuff kind of pays off down the road. But I think the bottom line is just that there have not been any egregious overpays, right? There aren't any contracts that are just wow, there's no chance this isn't going to work out. And in the grand scheme, Troy talks a lot about chemistry, getting the people right, whether it's in the draft or whatever else. I know people thought Mason Plumlee was a little overpaid, but then he comes in and Mason played really well. And I tweeted a Mason Plumlee highlight the other week because I was just watching something on YouTube and that play popped up. And I was like, yeah, greatest play in Pistons history, which I think most people understood that I was being a little facetious. But Mason came in, he had good chemistry with the guys, and then, it worked out. Yeah, not all backup centers work out or starting or whatever. And Marvin, I think, is kind of the same way. He comes in, makes your guards look good, fits in, has something to prove. For Troy, that's always a good gamble. Even if the result doesn't end the way you want it, it's more so about the process with him. And I think that makes sense just from the standpoint of Marvin does a lot of things this roster didn't have, and he fits. So why not pay him and let him continue to grow and prove something?
Yeah, and I think Mason Plumlee, we missed something he did really well, which was short roll and short roll pass. And the roster missed that last season. And I don't know that the roster still has that. It'll be interesting. I think Jalen Duren's a guy that can do that down the road. There was one more offseason addition that we will get to start segment 2. That is Kevin Knox, the youngster that had been playing with the Knicks, was traded to the Atlanta Hawks. We'll talk about him, how he fits into the roster, and how the rest of this roster will unfold.
All right, hey, Carlos, just a quick idea. How about if I say, hey, this is Sean Windsor, and you say, hey, this is Carlos Morales, and I'll go, and then we'll go back. You want to try that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Hey, this is Sean Windsor.
And this is Carlos Benares.
And we are the team behind Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean, where we are going to talk about, you guessed it, sports, but lots of other stuff. Like what, Carlos?
Oh, we're going to talk about your favorite subject, Sean, food. Probably more food. Arts, culture, sports, TV, movies, you name it. If it's happened in Detroit, we're going to talk about it.
And sometimes we're going to have guests in who obviously know a lot more than we do about just about everything. But we're going to have some Free Press journalists to talk about big stories, folks from the sports world. We're going to be out every Thursday. You can find this podcast wherever you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We hope you'll join us.
All right, we're back. Going to get into some roster fit stuff. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about Kevin Knox, who was maybe the one surprise signing so far. 2 years, $6 billion. We've seen this a lot. I read about it last Saturday, but we've seen this a lot, with this current regime, bringing in former lottery picks who haven't really figured it out and bringing them in. A low risk situation and just seeing if they still have some game. Jahlil Okafor, Dennis Smith Jr. was in the Derrick Rose trade.
Josh Jackson.
I don't know if you want to throw Trey Lyles in there. I think he was like the 12th or 13th pick, but still a guy.
Marvin Bagley.
Yeah, Marvin Bagley, of course. And Kevin Knox kind of fits that same boat. So I really don't know what to expect or what to make of it, because I think on paper, Kevin has all the tools to be a pretty good NBA wing. I'm not going to talk about him in terms of like, can this guy be a star or whatever, because it's been a few seasons, but he has the tools to be a pretty good rotation guy. The shot's not broken. He's got good size. His touch around the rim seems like it should be fine. But then you just look at the numbers, and outside of him being a decent corner 3-point shooter in a couple seasons, like the efficiency just has not been there.
It's not good. It's not good.
So it kind of makes you wonder what exactly has gone wrong with him. I'm not going to pretend I've seen a lot of Kevin Knox over the years, but I watched some stuff after they signed him. But I think what's unique about him is that he could fill a really huge need for this team if he could just knock down open threes pretty reliably. And I don't think there's a very high bar he has to clear just to become a rotation player for this team, because he is 6'7", with theoretical ability to shoot. So I don't know how you feel about this one, Bryce, but I see the logic. I just don't know if he's shown enough to really justify the chance he's been given.
I actually watched a bunch of Kevin Knox film over the weekend, from his rookie season all the way up into this past season. And I think you were, pretty much were right that the shooting is inconsistent. Like, it's so hard not to buy into it though, Amari, because the shot looks so good. And then you look at the numbers and they just aren't great. They're okay. He has like an ability to get into the lane, but he doesn't finish it very well. I wish the floater was real. He's gotten better moving the ball, like just being a ball mover. He's not necessarily going to create for other people. And then defensively, it's okay. I don't think he's going to be the worst defender the Pistons have ever seen, but he's not going to be a huge positive on that end. I think what he could do, and I don't see where the minutes come, and this can lead us into the rotation stuff, Amari. I don't know where he gets minutes, to be honest with you, but I think what he could provide is like a small ball 4 guy who comes in, stretches the floor, provides spacing, and I think if he can knock down shots, all of a sudden he becomes some decent value.
For him, it's just being a 3-and-D guy for sure, just like locking into that row, knock down open shots, key in on your man on defense. Like, they're going to switch. Like, can you defend some bigger guys? Can you stay in front of smaller guys? Yeah, it's just theoretical. But again, it's kind of like Marvin, where $3 million a year is not a whole lot. It's only 2 years. If it doesn't work out, you need a roster spot next year. It's not too hard to part ways with him. I also wonder if like the best version of Kevin Knox next season gives you anything you don't already get from Sadiq Bey. And if those guys could play with each other as well, because Sadiq, and I kind of wrote this yesterday, but I wouldn't be shocked if he plays out of 4 next season just because they do need shooting. Like Knox, is he in that same role where he can play the 3, but maybe you want him against bigger guys on defense? I'm just curious about him, but it's also possible we don't see a lot of Kevin Knox at all unless guys get banged up. So bottom line for him is that he's in a low-stakes scenario, and if it doesn't work out for him and the Pistons, it's not a huge deal, but I think there's enough upside here where it could work out. It could work out. It's just, I think we've seen with Josh Jackson and Jahlil Okafor and some of the other guys, if it didn't work out previously, are you deep enough in your development where it probably just won't work out at all? But the Pistons, of course, are in no rush, so they can take some time to figure that out.
And I do think he can play the 4 and be a little bit switchable, like against second unit guys, Omar. Like, I hope everybody understands that. We're not talking about Kevin Knox coming in and playing starter minutes. If he is, something went terribly wrong with the Pistons season. But if he's playing in the second unit at the 4, I think he can hold up physically against second unit 4 guys, and then he can be switchable if he's put in ball screen situations. Off ball, he's not very good. On ball, other than trying to get through ball screens, I thought he was okay. Like, there was some reps I was like, man, like, I think he can guard on ball. He can use his length and do that. So really it comes down, can he knock down shots? If he's knocking down shots at 37, 38, 39%, he may stay on the floor. If he's not, I don't think he does enough else offensively for it to really matter. So let's stay at the 4 spot, Omari, because I think that's the spot where it's like, man, this is kind of wonky. Who's going to play there? And let's talk about Isaiah Stewart. I feel like the organization has great belief in Isaiah Stewart's ability to shoot the 3 ball next year. You've talked about it a little bit. Other Pistons beat writers have talked a little bit about it. Do you think that's ultimately where Troy Weaver, Dwayne Casey, and the organization sees Isaiah Stewart's future at the 4?
I don't know about him being a full-time 4. Depending on the roster makeup, then maybe that's where he makes sense. But I think he'll always play some 5. I think he would have to really, really, really shoot the ball to be a full-time 4, and he may get there. But even if he does, he can still play the 5. I think it just more so depends on what lineup you want to go with. Because if the Pistons do get to the point where they're playing in the finals, he's probably playing some 5 anyway, just because teams tend to go a bit smaller and he could switch on smaller guys. So, I think a floor spacing 5 who can defend, 3 through 5 is pretty much perfect for any type of playoff run. But on this roster, I do think there's a chance that he does play some 4 if he can shoot. And I think that's the big if. Because if Isaiah Stewart can't shoot, then to me, that would lead me to believe that you just keep him at the 5. You can play Bagley at the 5, or you Bagley at the floor, and then you play KO at the 5. And then you just play Sadiq at the 4. And that's basically your front court rotation is Sadiq, Bagley, Stewart, and KO. 2 of those guys could shoot. Bagley's pretty good on the interior. And then we don't know if Isaiah Stewart can shoot or not, but defensively, I think you kind of have to play him anyway. And, then maybe at that point, you're not seeing a lot of Duren or Noel, which in the grand scheme is also fine. I talked about Noel earlier, and then Duren is only 18 years old. So, I know fans want to see Duren next season, and I think we'll see him here and there. But it just wouldn't shock me if they decide to bring him on a little bit more slowly because he is so young. It's like the clock is ticking. He's going to be here the next 7 years more than likely. So you don't have to prioritize getting him 35 minutes on opening night. I don't know if Isaiah needs to play the 4 next season. I think if he could shoot, that makes it easier. But it wouldn't shock me if that transition to him playing 4 a lot more is still a year off from now.
I think I saw an interview the other day that Jalen Duren's going to be the youngest player in the NBA to start the season. Everybody talked about Shaedon Sharpe. Shaedon Sharpe's already 19.
Yeah.
Jalen Duren doesn't turn 19 until November. So we're still talking, he will start his NBA career as an 18-year-old. Jalen Duren. I believe that's right. Is it November that is his birthday, or is it October?
No, it's November. And I believe he will be the youngest player in the league next season.
Yeah, so I probably jumped the gun there because I see he has skills that could immediately translate to the NBA in terms of being a lob threat, and I think he's good defensively. But yeah, maybe it is better for him to start and play in the G League, and that's why it looks like this roster has too many bigs. But if he's playing down there to kind of develop and work his way in, and we'll see him at Summer League eventually, maybe not Thursday night because that trade doesn't become official until Wednesday, so he'd only have about 24 hours to meet with the team. But as you're talking through that, I can't help but think about this, Omari. Talk about versatility with Stu. I think that's going to be Jalen Duren is versatility. Sadiq Bey being able to play multiple positions. I want to talk about Cade Cunningham being able to do that in a second. But think about some of the NBA lineups you have right now. The Minnesota Timberwolves just traded for Rudy Gobert. So they have a front court of Gobert and Cat. You have a front court of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. And then you have teams like the Golden State Warriors who are starting Draymond at the 5. You have a team like the Raptors who's starting everybody between 6'6" and 6'9". Like they only take players other than Fred VanVleet in that range. You got to have dudes that are versatile. You can't just be a one-size-fits-all player, or you can't play every night.
We're definitely seeing a lot of versatility. And you make a good point with Cleveland. Like, we are seeing teams take different approaches to their front court rotations. I think there's some logic that you need some spacing up there. But if you have enough shooting and playmaking from the other positions, you could probably get away with it, especially if you have a big, like, Evan Mobley's got touch out to mid-range. He shot the ball from pretty well early on, and that fell off. But he can handle the ball. He really is a unique big in that he's got a lot of guard skill. So that makes it easier. Obviously, Draymond is like the most guardy big in the NBA. So, you can play Draymond pretty much anywhere and feel pretty good about it. So I think there's an opportunity for the Pistons to get creative next season. Even if we don't see Duren early on, I really am curious if we do see him in the G League, only because we just haven't seen the Pistons assign any of the first-round picks to the G League yet. So he would be the first, other than Cade, who was recovering from the injury last season.
But he never played a game, right? He just practiced.
Never played a game, right? Like, we haven't seen any of those guys play games, and I think Duren would just dominate the G League because he is like, you usually don't see guys who can block shots and are that bouncy in the G League. So I would just be curious to see if they do it. But if he could, like, we talked about short rolling with Plumlee earlier. If Duren could do some of that, like, he might just be good enough to where he's in the rotation anyway. So, if Duren's good enough to play, I don't think he'll be in the G League at all.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he's definitely going to catch lobs day one. I think he can play drop coverage along with he's a little bit switchable defensively. I'm not saying he's going to be perfect. I'm not saying he's going to be the best rookie defender in the league. I'm not saying that, guys. But here's my other question, Omari. Like, I haven't watched a ton of G League games, but so the advantage of sending him to the G League is that he can work on these other aspects of his game, right? The shooting, the short roll passing, that stuff. But how much of that is he going to have to do? Because in the G League, you're literally just going to throw it up to him. He's going to jump higher than everybody else. Like, I wonder if he's going to develop, like, the coaching staff is really going to have to stay, like, pick and pop here, Jalen. We know you can roll and get a lob dunk, but we want you to pick and pop and knock down this shot. We want you to short roll. Like, I just wonder if it's actually going to be difficult for him to develop some of that stuff based on how much he could dominate the competition.
I agree. I think he would make life a lot easier for the G League guards.
That's true.
Just to have a guy like that. So maybe there's some upside there. But yeah, like, I think Duren, like, he's 18 years old. So on one end, it's like, well, he's 18, so you don't want to set expectations too high. On the other end, he's already skilled enough, and it's the AAC, so it's not quite Power 5, but still he reclassified in high school, was basically a high school senior, thriving against college competition last season at the age of 18. Like, he was 17 years old when his college season started, and now he comes to the NBA, and his role is still basically the same. He's going to, of course, there's a massive leap in talent from the AAC to the NBA. But as far as what you're just asking him to do, which is, catch lobs, roll to the rim, hold your own defensively, drop coverage, maybe some switches here and there. Bigs have a bigger learning curve, but you're not asking Duren to do things that he hasn't already done at a high level, despite his age. So he's a wild card for me. Like, I think there is a chance he comes in and he's perfectly capable. And that's another reason why we may not see Nerlens, because if you're getting everything you get from Nerlens from Duren, and Duren is the guy you just picked 13th, maybe you just leave him out there and, you just don't think about it too hard. Because, it wouldn't shock me if Duren comes in next season and he just is fine from day one.
Let's talk about the guy that was selected number 5 overall, who we will see on Thursday night, in Jaden Ivey, and the backcourt for the Detroit Pistons. Obviously, Cade Cunningham's going to be there. We've talked a little bit about Sadiq Bey. Is he going to start at the 3 or the 4? But do you think Jaden Ivey ends up starting day one for Detroit? Or do you put in an Alec Burks who provides that floor spacing and play him there and let Jaden Ivey kind of attack second unit NBA teams early on in his career?
So I'm still undecided on that as well, because Killian was a day one starter and Cade was a day one starter. So this is your third ball handler you've taken in the top 7 in 3 years. Do you kind of stick with that same script when you already have Killian, you already have Cade? Of course, Killian started coming off of the bench last season. Like, does that thinking still hold? Because I think Ivy, on one hand, maybe you want to start him alongside Cade since, like these are your 2 highest drafted players and these may be the 2 guys who have the biggest odds of getting you back into making deep playoff runs. On the other hand, I think the Pistons are aware that Killian's learning curve was probably a little bit longer than they expected early on. I think they expected he would be more of a quick learn just because he had played professionally overseas when he gets to the league. And we don't need to get too deep into that, but Killian still has some stuff he has to work on, obviously. And then on top of that, Ivy was a decent shooter last year. He showed some upside, but if he's not consistently spacing the floor, and he's also, we've talked about he's not quite a point guard. Maybe you are better off just bringing him off the bench, letting him attack second units, taking some pressure off. And then kind of like Killian and Cade last year, you can bring Ivy off, you can let him run, with the first unit in the fourth quarter and close games out. And it's a little bit of the best of both worlds. So I'm curious about that because I'm inclined to believe he would start just because he's a 5th pick and they've kind of tossed their point guards like into the fire from day one. But maybe that thinking changes now that you already have 2 ball handlers on the roster who are a bit more experienced and you can bring them on more slowly.
Is it Alec Burks in? Is it Killian Hayes that starts with Cade? Or is it the one that's going to get this episode shut off, Corey Joseph?
I would think if Killian can knock down the open shots, there's a good chance he starts. Again, that's a big if. I forget what he shot last season, but it's probably like 27% from 3. So I think it's hard to start a point guard who shoots that poorly. In which case, like I think Burks would have a great chance just because he probably is.
26% from 3 last year. Hayes is 27% from 3 on his career and just over 2.5 attempts per game, 92 games played.
Yeah, so that's obviously tough to start. That makes him a better fit for the second unit. So Burks, I think he's a sure thing. For a fact he fits with everybody. Yeah, I could definitely see him starting next season. I also wouldn't be shocked if Corey Joseph starts just because there's already
Don't do it, Omari.
and Corey did shoot 41% from 3 last season, so people ignore that. People ignore that. Like, people are always mad at Corey in my mentions, but like I may just have to mute Corey and just like stop reading it because the man did shoot 41% from 3.
And he rotate. I know it's like not a sexy thing, but that man will rotate and get a box out on the weak side. He may not come up with the rebound, but he's going to rotate where he's supposed to do defensively. And that stuff does matter. And I don't think that's what's going to happen. The fun lineup, right, is something you outlined in your article. Again, I say it every episode. Go read Omari Sankofa II on DetroitFreePress.com. But the Killian, Cade, Jay Nivey with Bay at the 4 and then either Stu or Marvin or someone at the 5, like that's the fun lineup. That's the lineup we got to see. I'm not saying it has to start, but I want to see that lineup a little bit early in the season.
Yeah, somebody asked Dwayne about his love for 3-guard lineups during the Ivy Duran press conference. And Dwayne pretty much said straight up, like we could definitely see Cade, Jaden, and Killian play together. Which I don't know how well that works, honestly. Like, I think there's some upside. Like, you have 2 guys that can defend and Killian and Cade. At least one guy that could shoot. Well, I say that, but Cade did shoot 31% last season. So, I think that'll bump up a lot next year, but we still have to see. But potentially not a lot of shooting in that backcourt, especially since I don't know if Jaden's going to be a great shooter from day one. But hey, next year's draft's pretty good. I think the Pistons have made it pretty clear that while they still plan on competing every night, they're not circling this upcoming season as a season we have to make the playoffs. So give it a shot, experiment. I mean, why not? You've drafted all these guys, so you might as well go ahead and see if they can play together.
Yeah, I mean, to me, all the more reason to play that lineup then. Like, if this team isn't necessarily worried about the box score wins and losses, then throw those kind of lineups out there and let's have some fun with it and let those guys play together. So I do want to see it. I think I'm in the minority here, but I'm okay with Cade scaling down to the 3 defensively. Obviously, you still want the ball in his hands, but I'm okay with him scaling down to the 3 or up to the 3, I guess, defensively and guarding, those positions because especially if he put on some muscle, which it looks like he did this offseason. One quick thing before we get to Summer League and the roster and what we want to see. I just want to put a bow on the offseason, Omari. So 5 guys are out for the Pistons from the end of last season. Jeremy Grant, Frank Jackson, Luka Garza, who we will see on Thursday night, Carson Edwards, Rodney Magruder, and Jamarco Pickett as a 2-way would be the 6th guy. Buddy Boeheim took that 2-way spot. The other 5 guys in are draft picks Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey, and then former Knicks, Alec Burks, Nerlens Noel, Kevin Knox. What do you think, just as you look at that, which group do you think is more talented? Like, I think it's kind of fun to look at that. I think Jeremy Grant's the most talented player right now of the 5, but I actually think the roster got better if you look at the haul as a whole.
I think the Pistons got a little bit deeper. Like Jeremy Grant probably is the best overall player other than Cade Cunningham, who I do think could probably, firmly leapfrog Jeremy next season. So if you just look at it from the standpoint of, some of the young guys will be better. That kind of evens it out some. But yeah, from a depth standpoint, like Frank Jackson, like again, if he's shooting as well as he did 2 years ago, then like he's a rotation piece. That season he really wasn't because he was hurt and his shooting slumped. Garza, Edwards, Magruder, yeah, all like fringe rotation guys for the most part. You bring in Duren, who has as much long-term upside on the roster as anybody except maybe Cade. Like honestly, I think Duren has all the tools to be at least like a Robert Williams type center, and he's firmly above average, right? Yeah, like Burks, like proven established role player, Noel, proven established role player, and then Ivy, 5th pick, probably should have went top 4. From day one will be one of the best athletes in the league as far as like that first step of just getting downhill. I think this team is a little bit better. Like the Pistons are coming off of 2 seasons where they won fewer than 25 games. It wouldn't shock me if this team gets closer to 30, if not maybe a little bit more than that. I do think this team is better overall. I think just from the internal growth, getting a little bit deeper, you got some vets that could play. I think these pieces just fit probably a little bit better. And I do think this team's a little bit better than it was last season.
Well, I think you get better long-term potential from the group of 5 that came in, along with just better now assets. Like, I don't know that Frank Jackson, Garza, Edwards, maybe there was some long-term potential, but not as good as Duren or Noel. And there wasn't a whole lot of like assets, quote unquote, with those guys. Obviously, Jeremy Grant was the best one of all the guys we're talking about for who came in and who came out. Before we go to the Summer League roster, I want to ask about this. There's a 15-man roster right now, Omari. What are the chances the current 15-man roster is the 15-man roster on opening night?
That's a good question. I am.
That's what I do. I come up with good questions.
I do think there's a chance that this is the roster. Just from talking to people the night of free agency, it seemed like they were pretty certain that after the Kevin Knox signing that they were done for the night, which surprised me because I'm just used to saying that past midnight on free agency night. And people were asking over the weekend, like, do you think Kelly Olynyk gets traded soon, this and that? And the vibe I've gotten, and I'm sure by jinxing this, are going to make a move Monday night, so that our pod is obsolete Tuesday morning. But just the vibe I've gotten is that the roster is what it is right now. And it wouldn't shock me if they make another move to balance things out. Like maybe you flip Kelly or there's another move in there. But I think the other thing hanging over this is that they brought in Burks and Noel. And last I heard, they don't intend on trading those guys. Now, maybe somebody comes up with an offer you can't turn down. There's always a chance of that. But I don't think the Pistons would. I think the Pistons have gotten most of what they wanted to accomplish this offseason done. Getting Duren as the 13th pick, who I think if they had gotten that 7th overall pick from Portland, like Duren would have been a pick anyway. So, they got the player that they really wanted. And, you address some need, with the Burks signing, giving you some shooting. And then you also have a very clean cap sheet for next season where you have 2 guys on team options in Burks and Noel. The Kelly Olynyk partial guarantee. any move the Pistons make from here on, it's still a little bit of money, but you have to weigh that flexibility next offseason versus what the player would give you, not just next season, but long term. And I think they are in a spot where even if the roster doesn't have every need addressed, you kind of go into next season with the mindset of, this is our last season of full true rebuild before we really, really go for it in 2023-24. So it would not surprise me if the rosters are already set and the Pistons don't do anything else. But if they do anything else, maybe there's one small move they bring in to get some more shooting. But I think most of their offseason is done right now for sure.
Yeah, and just Hami and Corey Joseph will be unrestricted free agents. Those guys are both on expiring contracts as well. So the books are super clean. Marvin Bagley III could be your highest paid player going into next offseason. And if Kevin Durant's traded to the Detroit Pistons on Monday night, we will re-record this pod and have something new for you. But other than that, Amari, I think we're probably going to be good. So let's take a quick break right here. And then when we come back, Omari and I are going to see our Pistons in person Thursday night in Las Vegas for NBA Summer League. Let's break down the roster and talk about what we're hoping to see.
I'm Alyssa Robinson for the Detroit Free Press. When you wake up every morning, what's the first thing you do? Check your email? Me too. And when you sign up for our daily briefing newsletter, you'll get all the latest news sent directly to your inbox so you can wake up and be ready for the day. We also have newsletters about COVID-19 in Michigan, the latest entertainment headlines, as well as Woodward 248, a newsletter specifically for people living and working in Southeast Oakland County. And don't forget about automotive headlines and all the latest news from our Michigan sports teams. We have a newsletter for every personality and preference. Just head to freep.com/newsletters to sign up for any one of these great options and more.
So Summer League, honestly, I think this is the most exciting part of the summer for fans to actually watch some basketball and get.
I'm so excited, Amari. I'm juiced.
Guys, I'm super excited too. We'll both be down there, so that'll be fun. Considering that last Summer League was actually the first time we met, or even probably talked for the first time, honestly. So just shows how much things can change in the span of a year. But yeah, so they've announced their Summer League roster, all the 2020 picks, all the 2021 picks, and of course all the 2022 picks are on there, which I think was a surprise because typically your first overall pick doesn't play in two Summer Leagues. But I think a lot of what this team has talked about just from a player development and just a chemistry standpoint is, we're not going to speed this process up. Our young guys are still young. And Dwayne pointed out yesterday, which I hadn't considered, that Isaiah Stewart has not played a Summer League game yet. Of course, 2020 was the pandemic season, so nobody played. And in 2021, he had the ankle injury last summer, so he kind of missed a lot of last summer. So from Detroit's standpoint, he's still a guy that's still very early. Well, not early in his development, but he hasn't had a full summer yet. So if you're going to have Cade going because it's only a second Summer League and you're going to have Isaiah going, you might as well just have all the guys in there, right? And even if we don't see Sadiq and some of the other players as much, I think it makes sense just to have everybody present so that they can practice and kind of get that chemistry going. So definitely makes for a very exciting roster, probably more exciting than you would have expected this time last week.
Yeah, I was excited anyway, for Jaden. Jalen Duren is not on the roster, guys, just because that trade is not official until the NBA moratorium is over. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, Amari, but I want to ask because it's been all over Twitter. I put out my thoughts on it. If you had a vote in the front office room, if you're sitting in there around the round table with Troy Weaver and he asked for your vote and he said, Omari Sankofa II, do you think Sadiq Bey should play in Summer League? Would you vote yes or no?
I would vote yes.
No,
I would vote yes. I want to see him put up 50 again.
You just want to watch him play because that's going to be an easy article to write on Thursday night, and you can get to bed earlier. As a member of the front office, would you vote yes or no?
I would still vote yes. I would vote yes for one game. No, I probably wouldn't even write about Sadiq just because I think people are more interested in the more unproven guys. But to me, if I'm going to have everybody down there, everybody's going to play in at least one game. I'm going to roll out a super lineup of Killian, Cade, Sadiq, Ivy, and Stewart, that first game, just to make a point that we're still young and make our guys look good, right? Like, yeah, go ahead and let them beat up on some of the other guys who are.
What if they aren't good? What if they play bad, though? Do you know how much Pistons Twitter is going to explode? Like, what if Cade goes 0 for 12 and Killian still can't shoot and Stu can't shoot and Sadiq is turning the ball over? Like, I realize I'm being like dramatic here and playing devil's advocate, but Pistons Twitter would explode if that happens, Amari.
They would, and I think from a comedy standpoint, it would just be funny because you expect these guys to look like the Harlem Globetrotters, and they come out and play bad. From like Dwayne's standpoint, now it gives you something to coach it to them, right? Like you guys got cocky, you thought it'd be a layup, and it wasn't. Like you still have to earn your play. So I think whether they play good or bad, and people on Twitter are going to blow up anyway. So that's kind of that's
the beauty of Twitter. That's what makes it fun.
Twitter, people are going to be upset. So it is what it is. But if you have everybody down there, you might as well let them get like a little bit of run. Like you don't have to play them 40 minutes and risk injury or whatnot. But, just let them get their feet wet a little bit. I would only do it for one game. But to be whole rosters down there, we're getting at least one quarter of basketball in for sure.
All right, I'll just say for the record, I would vote no for Bay and Cade. I would vote yes for Stu and Hayes. Wes and I, again, have talked about this at length. He's convinced me a little bit. I don't want to get into the whole thing because it would take up the rest of the episode. So that's just my thought. I will say, I was excited about Vegas anyway. Again, it hasn't even been 12 months since we met in person out there. It is crazy how things have changed. And essentially, because Summer League was in August last year, I believe, because we were the NBA was still trying to play catch up a little bit. So 11 months. You and I met in person the first time. Now we're 20 episodes into Pistons Pulse podcast. It is crazy. I'm excited, but I'm even more excited because those guys might play for the one game I get to see the Detroit Pistons play. What do you want to see from some of the other guys? Jaden Ivey. We will eventually see Jalen Duren, I assume. I don't know if Pershida's going to get a play. That trade hasn't gone through either. Like, technically, that pick was part of the Jeremy Grant trade, so he hasn't become officially a member of the organization either. What do you want to see from those guys? Or what member of that G League roster are you kind of like, man, that's intriguing to watch this young kid play?
So obviously with Ivy and Duren, they're going to be two of the best athletes in the entire gym, no matter what day.
Other than me and you.
And, I'm giving up a little bit more height, but, if I can make up for it. But, no, I think just Ivy and Duren, how much their natural gifts just sort of allow them to dominate. I think they're both still raw in certain ways, but I think you kind of hope that you just have Duren setting screens for Ivy. You probably don't have to maneuver your chess pieces too much. You can have a lot of success just from that. I know that they're challenging Ivy to lock in on defense so he can do some of the other parts of his game. But as far as Summer League, I think I just want to see just what that first step looks like, right? Like, just like what you're already good at. Like, let's say you be good at that. They're going to challenge him to do other stuff. But just from me, an onlooker, a beat writer, that's what I'm curious about. Just what does this look like in real life? I've not seen Jaden Ivey play in person yet. And you have guys with probably a little bit more to prove than your average college player. And, they're in like a make or break situation. So how do they defend Ivy? If they start to trap him, or, how much space do they give him on the perimeter? Like, is he a guy that can punish you and knock down those threes consistently? He did it at Purdue for like the first half of the year. Second half kind of fell off. So what does that look like? I'm just looking at it as like, what does Jaden Ivey, the NBA player, look like? Like, that's, the first sign of that, right?
And what's cool, Amari, is now we get to see him play off ball, right? Like, if Killian was going to play, you probably would have got a little bit, but Killian's probably not going to play every game anyway. So, you still have Saban Lee, but we're going to get to see what this really looks like with him and Cade Cunningham, or even the lineup we talked about earlier. We may get in Summer League on Thursday the Killian, Cade, Ivy, Bay, Stu lineup to start that game. And so I think it'll be cool. You'll get to see him play off ball and what he looks like there. And then as Summer League progresses and you start taking out Sadiq and Cade and maybe even Killian, then you get to put the ball in his hands and see what he does maybe in games 3 and 4. So I think we'll get the full package from Jaden Ivey. So I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see what Killian's shot looks like, what Stu's shot looks like. But I'm also excited about a couple other guys, Buddy Boeheim, like a guy that can shoot it. What does he look like? And then the kid from Howard, I believe, Kyle Foster. Balsa Koprivica, like he was a guy that a lot of us have forgot about. I'm interested to see him and how many minutes he gets and if he looks better this year.
He's a wild card, of course, because I think on paper, just sort of a bouncy rebounder, lob guy. There's some stuff to like there. I'm curious to see if he gets a little bit more opportunity. Now, it is like technically year 2 for him. Like, I mean, like late second round pick, so you can't set expectations too high. But definitely curious to see if there's a player in there. I'm excited for it. Isaiah Livers, we didn't see him last year because he was still rehabbing the knee. Like, I really liked watching Isaiah Livers play last season.
Yes.
I thought for a second round pick, I mean, just for a rookie in general, he never ever looked sped up. And I think that's more like it's hard to explain what that looks like putting it into words. But I think when your job is to shoot and defend, and the game never ever looks too fast for you. Like, he's not like an amazing athlete, but he always looked like he belonged out there. And his three really began to fall toward the end. So it wouldn't shock me if Isaiah Livers just comes in the summer league and he's just like perfect, right? Like, he's making all the right reads, like moving the ball, knocking down open shots, like. I think he's an NBA player. Like, we only saw him like 10
100%.
games last year, but just from what I saw last year, I was like, he looks like he never ever looked sped up. Like, he never looked like the moment was too big. Like, for me, it's hard to see how he doesn't figure it out as long as the shot continues to fall. So Livers will be fun to watch. Buddy Boeheim, just high volume shooter, 4 or 5 years in college. We talked to him at practice yesterday. Of course, he could shoot, but just curious to see how he looks defensively. Like, can he find guys who are open?
The other two-way guy, Braxton Key, and I'll admit, Amari, not a guy I love for the Pistons. Wasn't super excited about him getting one of the two ways, and I haven't loved the minutes he got. I know some guys are a fan, but he was young, just figuring it out. I'm interested to see what he looked. I'm interested to see how is Jordan Brink, who this is an amazing story. It's incredible that he's getting this opportunity. He's been a grinder in the Pistons organization. Have fun figuring out the minutes for this roster, especially early on. That's not going to be easy for the young coach.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that too. So I've gotten to know Jordan pretty well, like over the last year. Like that first year was like the COVID year, so we weren't like going into the practice facility or really any of that. So it's cool for me to be able to get to know a lot of the behind the scenes people a lot more this past year. But yeah, Jordan's a grinder, man. I mean, like those player development coaches, like I don't think the average fan understands just how busy they are. Like they have late nights and early mornings, right? Like they are. I mean, it just really takes a lot of dedication. But he absolutely loves his job. It'll be his first time coaching ever. Period.
That's crazy.
Like we asked him yesterday. He said he's never coached before, but the players love him. The front office coaching staff has a lot of respect for him. And they're using this as an opportunity to let him get his feet wet, flex his skill a little bit more. And that'll be fun. Like that'll be fun. I think that adds a wrinkle to summer league that, you don't always see. But I know he's excited for it. I know he's honored that he got the opportunity to do that, and just really good dude overall. And just a cool opportunity for sure.
Because he started out as an assistant video coordinator, then became the head video coordinator, then player development. And he just literally took the run. I love stories like that. Not that there's anything wrong with, getting to start at a higher spot, but there is something kind of special about those guys that start at the quote unquote bottom and have just grinded their way to the top. And that was really cool. Whenever I saw that, I wasn't familiar with the name whenever they made the announcement, but as you read articles and saw tweets and stuff like that, I'm excited for him. I don't even know him. Sounds like you know him decently well. I'm excited for him, and what an opportunity, but a little bit of pressure, like I said, coming on with the first one, with the talent they have and some of these names that he's going to have to figure out how to play them and what rotations and what minutes. I'm sure they outline a lot of that ahead of time as well, though. And
got to give James Edwards from The Athletic a shout out for writing the story. I'm sure most fans didn't know a lot about Jordan Brink beforehand, and he kind of laid it all out. So I don't want to talk about the story and not credit him for it. So shout out to James for that. But no, I think it'll be, I think it just shows that the organization as a whole sees Summer League as an opportunity for everybody to go, right? It's not just the players, but people on staff as well. You want to continue to build this culture and give people opportunity to show what they can do. I mean, you're doing that for the players, so you might as well do it for, your coaches and other, team personnel as well. Yeah, that'll be fun. Jordan, he's me and him are about the same age. I'm 28, he's 30. To see a first-time coach in that type of environment, coaching guys who are still basically in college, right? I mean, Kay's the age of a high school junior. Darren is a freshman, right? I mean,
they're all 18 to 21, 22.
Yeah.
They're.
That was, I kind of got when I realized that I'm like a full 10 years older than Jalen Duren, and I remember like when Wiggins got drafted, he was the first number one pick who was like younger than me. And now like I'm like a full 10 years older than somebody the Pistons took in like the lottery. We're getting off topic. I just wanted to say like I kind of realized that, and I was like, oh, okay. I see how things are going now for me. But no, but it'll be cool for Jordan. Like it'll be cool for all the guys. Jaden talked yesterday about how Jordan picked him up from the Shinola Hotel, and he's been with these guys all throughout the week. So there's already some chemistry and some trust there, and we'll see if it pays off for him on the floor.
All right, guys, real quick here, the Summer League schedule for you. Thursday, July 7th, they will play the Trailblazers. I assume Shaedon Sharpe will be playing in that game, and former Piston Luka Garza is on the Trailblazers Summer League roster. That's at 12 a.m. Eastern time. So as Wes rolls his eyes as I read that off, that's going to be a late night for you guys in Detroit, wherever. Some of you, I know some of our listeners are hopefully all over the world. Let us know. Leave a rating, a comment. Let us know where you're listening from. But, me and Omari will be out there in Vegas, so it'll be a little bit better local time. But Thursday night, 12 a.m. versus the Blazers. Saturday versus the Wizards at 6 p.m. Eastern. Then they'll play the following Tuesday against the Pacers, and then the Thursday, July 14th versus the Cavs. So 4 Summer League games in Vegas for the Detroit Pistons. We will drop an episode next Tuesday after the first 2 games, so we'll get 2 games to talk about. Again, Omari and I will be out there. Omari, are you staying the whole week, Omari? What's your schedule like?
I'm doing 5 days, so I get down there the morning of the 7th, and then I come back next Monday on the 12th. I did all 10 days last year, and what you learn about being in Vegas for 10 days is that it's the equivalent of being in Indy Ever City for 45 days. So like by the time you get to day 6, like you're just like why am I here? Like what's going on? Like people begin to leave. So just 5 days this year, but we'll still get 2 games. We'll still be back like Monday afternoon and evening, and then they play again Tuesday and Thursday. So we'll get about half the week. So, we'll be able to talk about 2 games next week, and should be fun. I think the first 4 or 5 days of Summer League are like the real Summer League because everybody's there and people begin to leave as the week goes on until you get to like the last day, and even people from the Pistons are looking at you like, what, you're still here? Like, go home. Like, why are you?
Grinder, I love it.
What are you doing, man? So, I did 10 days last year. I'm doing 5 this year. So, it'll be a fun week. Like, we're in like the thick of the off season now. I think this is what people anticipate, and Pistons should have the most fun Summer League roster by far, given that they have a number 1 pick on there. So we'll see.
I scheduled mine wrong. I'm flying out Wednesday morning or Wednesday afternoon because I thought there would be games all day on Thursday. So I wanted to be in Wednesday night, ready to go Thursday. Well, there's only 2 games Thursday night. So
yeah.
And I know people are like, you're in Vegas, Bryce. Like, I'm only going to Vegas to watch the games. I could care less about anything else. I want to meet, all these people that I've met through Twitter in person. Like, so I want to meet those people and I want to watch the games. I don't care about Vegas and gambling, and I love money way too much to gamble it away on craps, which I don't like, literally the game of craps that I don't, have any idea how to play. So I got to figure out what I'm going to do for about 18 hours in Vegas. And I know people listening are like, you can go do whatever you want. But for me, I messed that up a little bit. So
I was just going to say, and there'll still be like team people around. Like, yeah. I know the Pistons get down there on Tuesday. And, like they're like, you might walk around and just see some people and whatnot. So there'll still be some upside, but, we're not going to cry too many tears about you being in Vegas a little too early, obviously.
Yeah, nobody's feeling sorry for me that I have to figure out what to do in Vegas for, like I say, 12, 18 hours there. So again, we go off the rails. So let's shut it down here. One thing, guys, thank you so much for the support. Apple Podcasts went up to 100 ratings the Monday morning. We really appreciate it. If you give us one more 5-star, we'd really appreciate it so that we could say we have 100 5-star ratings since we have the 1 star. And then we're at 83 on Spotify. So I just think it'd be so cool if we could say we got 100 ratings on Spotify, 20 episodes in. Leave us a review. Let us know what you think about the podcast. But again, we appreciate the support so much. That's going to continue to help us grow and build what we're trying to build here with the Pistons Pulse. So thank you. Omari, take it away, my friend.
Again, thanks for all the support. We can't talk about metrics, but we'll just say the pod's doing very well. I think everybody's very pleased with the performance so far. So continue to give us that feedback. So shout out to our editor, Carrie G. You're the second, our executive producer, Anjanette Delgado, our other executive producer, Kirkland Crawford, And also big thanks to Wes, who helps with the outlines and keeps us in line. And as we get past Summer League, we'll definitely get Wes on here a lot more, because in a few weeks, we're just going to be on the wasteland of the offseason, unless this KD situation takes 2 months to resolve. So again, thank you, everybody. And we'll talk to you all next week.